Hey, ladies and gents, and welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, where we talk about video games and everything happening in the industry. As always, I'm joined by Dom.
Praise the sun.
Praise the sun. No Jordan this week, just the two of us. This will be our last podcast before our pre-E3 coverage. That'll start rolling out the week before E3. I'm trying to think of the way the timeline works out. It'll be like the 2nd through the 5th is all of our pre-E3 coverage with all of our guests. Look forward to that. Obviously, Jordan will be on that, so he'll be back for those. In terms of what we've been playing, you want to go first, Dom? Anything of note?
Yeah, Sekiro, and I'm done. It's over.
Oh, you got the plat?
Yes, it is. I was so deep and so committed to this platinum. I had been playing so much of it. Like, I was just obsessive about finishing this, and now it's finally done. And that's all I did, because I needed a break from like games for a minute here.
Just to breathe. Yeah.
It was just a lot. It got to be a lot at the end.
Well, the funny thing with obviously I go more for like Xbox completions rather than platinums. I always feel like it's like a teeter-totter, right? Where it's like you start on you're sitting on a teeter-totter, the other side's up in the air, and as you're going for the trophies, you start going up the teeter-totter to try to get to the other side, and once you reach the halfway point where the other side starts to come down, you're just full bore committed to it, right? It's just getting to that midway point to fully commit, because you're there thinking like, should I really be doing this? Should I really be going for the platinum? And then once you pass it and the teeter-totter starts dipping down, you're like, I got this, and you just race towards the finish line. It can be grueling, though. I understand where you're coming from. For me, it's either I take a full-on break like you, or I play something that's complete palate cleanser, right? So I hop into something that's like the opposite genre or like completely different in tone.
Yeah, that's the plan, but I didn't even get to that. Like, I wanted to get into What Remains of Edith Finch, or I still have that Neo Alpha sitting around I haven't touched yet that I thought I might mess around with. And now though, Katana Zero is on sale, so I might be going in that direction. We'll see.
Oh yeah, you'd be, because Jordan has played it. I don't think he's beat it. I obviously played it and beat it. So then, yeah, you'd be the third one to play through it. I'd be interested to see how you like it.
Yeah, it looks kind of similar, to be honest, or it has some similarities to Sekiro, I guess. I mean, you're using a katana, I guess, if nothing else. That's one thing.
Right. Yeah. Is there anything else? Movies, TV, anything of note?
I don't think so.
Okay, so I guess I'll go through everything I've done. Of note, I watched the first episode of HBO's Chernobyl.
Oh, nice.
I don't know if I'm going to continue watching it. And it's not even because most people are like, oh, it's really depressing. I just found it kind of boring, to be honest. It's weird to me that you have these people with British accents. It just, didn't work for me. I don't know if I'll go back and finish it. I think it's only 5 episodes, but...
And it's supposed to be so good, too.
Yeah, it's not that it's not good. I just find it's boring. And there's like, it's a weird disconnect with, you have all these people, like British actors running around talking about the Chernobyl explosion stuff. It just feels weird. Other than that, I'm trying to think of what I played. Played Magic the Gathering Arena, as usual, obviously. With the NBA Finals happening, I've had an itch to play some NBA, so I've been playing some of my Utah Jazz franchise. For those who didn't know, I'm a Utah Jazz fan. I know, weird. I'm like a Chicago Bears fan, Utah Jazz fan. My baseball team's the Cubs. It's all over the place. Well, I guess 2 in Chicago and 1 in Utah isn't that weird.
Well, you're kind of in that weird middle USA kind of region.
Well, I'm a state with no pro teams. And New Mexico doesn't have a single pro team, yeah.
And so when you look kind of like the states around, it's kind of like you could go in any direction with it, really, I guess.
Well, yeah, so I'm a Bears fan because my dad was a Bears fan. And then as I grew up and I started learning about the NFL, I love the history. And, like, I'm a very defensive-oriented person when it comes to football in general. So, like, 2 of my favorite teams growing up were the Bears and the Ravens. Yeah. So, like, I've loved the Ravens because of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and stuff, and obviously the Bears. And then the Utah Jazz, I always liked, whenever I'd watch basketball highlights, John Stockton and Karl Malone. And then they had a player in the mid-2000s named Andrei Kirilenko. He was this Russian basketball player named AK-47. He's a really good player. He did, like, a lot of everything. So he was one of the first players to record 5 different stats with double digits. So like one more than a quadruple double. He's most infamous in the world for having a policy with his wife that every year on his birthday he can find another woman.
Really?
Yeah, and that gained traction in the news cycles because it was like, what the hell? Obviously, he's European. I don't know if that doesn't mean that all Europeans like to cheat once a year, but, they're a little bit, societally it's different or whatever. Anyways, back to the point at hand, video games. Went on a huge tangent. So played NBA. The 2 new games I played, which I mentioned to you before we started the podcast, finally dipped into Spyro Reignited Trilogy, part of the palate cleanser after Sekiro. In the first world, loving it. You've seen it before, the upgrade from the original titles. It's gorgeous. One thing that a lot of people didn't really talk about is in the original Spyro games, they were all the dragons, the elder dragons that you would rescue were just like color variant generic dragons, right? Nothing really special about them. With the remake, I'd say it's a remake. They gave all of the dragons distinct personalities. They all have their own like careers. So like some of the dragons are artists and some of the dragons are like cooks, and they all have distinct looks. They all have distinct voices. They all have personalities, and it's really cool because as a kid playing through the games, that's what you'd imagine, right? Like, oh, all of these guys are so different. You'd make a story in your head based on like their name or whatever. And now, seeing that they actually have fully fleshed out personalities, I could imagine buying this game for my kid if I had one. And it's just really cool because they don't have to do all of that hard work with the imagination, right? Controls the same way. Feels great. Like I said, I'm only maybe 40 hours in. 40 minutes in. Not 40 hours. I'm only 40 hours in. I'm about 40 minutes in. Their games aren't too long from what I remember. As a kid, when I sucked at playing video games for the most part, I think I could still beat them in a relatively short time. So now, I'd assume I haven't looked it up, but at most maybe 5 hours a piece. That's just me speaking off the top of my head. I don't know. You hadn't really no attachment, right, to Crash or Spyro as a kid?
No, nothing really at all.
Yeah. You're what, 4 years younger than me? 5 years younger than me?
I don't know. I'm 25 now.
Oh no, I don't know why I always thought you and Jordan were way younger than me. You're 3 years, 2 and some change because I turned 28 in September. Yeah, so 2 and a little bit of change. So maybe just a little bit out of your age range, but even that, I like Crash and Spyro were like part of my childhood along with Pokemon. So playing through these games is really cool. The other, and I'll report back on it when I've played more. Obviously, I'm very early in. The other game I'm early in on, I have about an hour and maybe 10 minutes is. I'm trying to make sure I get the right name because there's 2 video games that have similar names that I always mess up by accident. It's not The Outer Worlds, it's The Outer Wilds.
Oh, yes, okay.
So The Outer Worlds,
made that mistake.
The Outer Worlds is the Obsidian, is that right?
Yep.
Obsidian RPG that's coming out later this year, which Dom and I know we're both excited for. Can't wait to see more about that game. Outer Wilds is a smaller indie game. The reason I'm playing it launched on Game Pass. Shout out to Game Pass. We'll talk about that in the Quickie News later. Have you seen any preview coverage for this game at all, Dom? Have you heard anything about it? So what I knew going in, right, is that it's a space exploration game. You start on a planet and you explore space. It's not trying to be as vast as like a No Man's Sky. It seems like a little bit more story driven. And you meet characters, and you're not a human. You're actually like this weird alien race, which I don't even know the name of. But essentially, the setup is the start of the game. You wake up out of your sleeping bag because you're like in the middle of the woods with one of your friends, and he says it's launch day. Make sure to go get the launch codes from the observatory, and it's your first day going out into space, right? So you go through the town, you meet a bunch of people, you get to the observatory, and when you're there, you find a statue of this. They're basically the forgotten race. Almost every sci-fi story has this. It's a race used to occupy this universe. They disappeared suddenly. No one knows what happened to them. But you have a lot of their artifacts left over, right? And your race is like, I wouldn't say reptilian. You remember that weird blue frog guy on the motorcycle for the commercials? No. The Motorola frog guy.
Crazy Frog?
Crazy Frog, yeah. Exactly. They're kind of like a mix between that and the Abe's Odyssey green guys. You know, those weird green dudes.
Yes. Okay.
So like they're not reptilian, but they're like smooth, weird alien dudes. And the race that you are is blue, and the ancient race that disappeared are like these. They look like anthropomorphic deer or ox, but they have like 3 eyes. So they have like 2 eyes and then 1 eye in the middle up top. Anyways, you see one of the statues, and your buddy says like, "Oh, it's a really cool statue. I think they're called like the Nami or whatever." And they say if you can find artifacts throughout space to try to figure out what happened to them, right? It seems like the basis of the game. Anyways, when you're leaving the observatory with the launch codes, the statue actually starts moving and its eyes glow and it looks at you, and you see a small thing pop up where it's showing all of your memories of all the experiences you just had leading up to this moment from the moment you started the game. So like if you went and like screwed off and like was like looking through areas that really had no NPCs, you'd see all of that. Or if you like stayed in a conversation with somebody for a while, it literally played through the entire point from you starting the game to interacting with the statue, right? So it's kind of insinuating that it's capturing your memories, right, to some extent. So then you go and you do some training to learn how to do the anti-gravity stuff in your suit. Then you go to your ship and you launch into space. And this is where it's kind of like a little bit open in terms of you can go to any of the planets or moons around you, just whatever one you want to land on. And one of the items you have is it allows you to hear noise in a distance and kind of track it down so you can try to find life on these planets. Some of them are unoccupied. Some of them have other astronauts from your world as well, and you want to check up on them and see how they're doing. So that leads to like some of them missing or them having lost communication that you don't know where they are. The first moon I landed on was small, and it had a guy there, one of your buddies, fellow astronauts, and he was basically talking about how lonely he is there, which is kind of sad. It's a very tiny moon, like very, very tiny. The second planet I go to, there's one of the fellow astronauts, but a giant like seed object landed on the planet from a different planet. Well, landed on the moon from a planet, and he's investigating, and it's making like a weird like humming noise. So you kind of like talk to him about what the hell is going on. What is this? On that planet, there's like these geysers, and when the water stopped, I dove down in it, and I went through like this, basically like this guided water chute, right? It pushed me through. I landed in this like underground area with a bunch of the artifacts from that ancient race, right? And right when I went to go scan them to translate them to see what they said, I got shot out of the geyser. Coming down, I forgot that I had my anti-gravity suit to kind of like propel myself from landing really hard, right? This is very important for the next thing I'm going to say. I land and I die, and then I wake up at the beginning of the game again. I don't have to go through all of the launch pad stuff to go get the launch codes, but I wake up again, I go and talk to the guy there at the campfire, and it's essentially like a Groundhog's Day thing. You familiar with the movie Groundhog's Day?
No.
Wow, okay. Groundhog's Day is a movie based on a guy who lives the same day over and over again.
Okay, that's what I figured. Something to do with that, but okay.
So essentially, I've only played about an hour and 10 minutes, and I got to the point where I respawned, and I talked, and I was like, what the hell happened? They're like, do you have a bad dream? And when I died, all of my memories popped up from the moment I left to the moment I died. So, from what I've inferred from the information I'm getting is that I'm living the same day over and over again because it's my mission to figure out what happened to this ancient race. And contextually, the reason I have all of my memories from before and I'm not just waking up from a bad dream is because it's saving all of my memories in that weird statue, right? So, very interesting. Actually, I'm really intrigued to go and find out what is going on these planets because, like I said, I basically just visited 2 small moons and then I learned the twist of the game that it's Groundhog's Day and I'm living over the same day again and again and again. And it's not one of the things where you die and then you wake up and it's like, oh, you were asleep for a couple of days. Like, it literally, you wake up and he's like, hey, it's launch day. You ready to go out for your first time? So, I don't know how deep the game's going to be. I don't know how long the game is. Obviously, this is an indie title, but it's interesting. I'm curious to see if because I didn't really, it was my first time figuring it out. I didn't know if because I was trying to translate the artifact messages in that cave, that's what triggered me to get shot away, right? Like, it's telling me like to not check them out, or if it's like a timed thing, right? Where I have to like get in there, translate them real quick, and then leave before the geyser starts. Yeah, I'm only an hour in, really intrigued to see where it goes. The spaceship stuff is really weird because it's not one of the things, Dom, where you take off from the planet and then when you start arriving at another moon or a planet, it like does an automatic landing sequence. You actually have to change your camera view to the landing camera view and land on the planet yourself. And there's like physics, okay. So like you have to make sure you're tilted the correct way to be able to land on the planet. And there's not a specific landing pad. You could literally land anywhere on that planet. It's weird, but
it sounds interesting, I'll say.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to hook me, though. Like, so if I end up going to another planet and it's kind of barren and empty and I die again, or my big concern is that I don't know how rich the planets are and I don't know how much is actually in the game, right? Because the first moon I went on, there was literally like a cabin and a guy, and it looked like a moon. It was like you're on the surface of our real moon. And it was a very small planet. Or moon, sorry. The second moon was a little bit bigger, but it's still kind of barren because it's uninhabited. There was like the guy and that giant seed that hit there and not much else except for naturally occurring things. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to planets where there are more like civilized structures or if it is about me exploring these planets. But once again, I doubt they're going to be as large and as vast as the No Man's Sky stuff. So, interested to see where that goes. Yeah, I don't know how much longer I'll play, but it has its hooks in me so far. We'll see how long that goes. I'm just worried that I'm going to play it, and then E3 is going to happen, and then I'm going to want to play something else that I get hyped for. Like,
yeah, there's a lot going on right now.
Exactly, and then I'm super excited for Super Mario Maker 2 at the end of June. There was something, Cadence of Hyrule apparently is coming out at the end of June too, which is the Crypt of the Necrodancer, Legend of Zelda.
Man, there was a rumor that it was going to come out literally today, May 30th. Yeah. That obviously didn't happen.
And they switched the date. It was so weird. It was like a placeholder. No, not necessarily a placeholder, but it was like in the script, and then they just changed it. They're like, oh no, it's June. It's getting a June. Very weird. I don't know if it's maybe something they just forgot to change in the back end, you know? Or maybe it was a set date.
It's still not been officially announced, though, right? That's still like rumor.
That's still the back end date. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another internal delay, Dom.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I don't think we have much else to say. It's only me and you. Usually, Jordan has a lot more to say than both of us.
I guess I'll point out really quick. I did watch, and I mentioned this to you guys, both the God of War Raising Kratos documentary and the Last Watch Game of Thrones like season 8 documentary. I don't know. It's both were really interesting. I usually don't get into documentaries just as a format, but both are really interesting to see the kind of stuff that, especially in the Game of Thrones side, like how much production and how, like the amount of just sheer fucking shit they had to do to make that all look how it did in the show it's crazy. The God of War one was really cool and a bit touching. Like you can feel like, you know, when they go to show it at E3, like how intense it is for the team and how much of a relief it is that it was received the way it was and stuff like that. But then you see all the work they put into it. It kind of makes you feel bad because that game was obviously really, really well received critically. That, I mean, other games, you know, have just as much, you know, that work that gets put into them that don't get the same kind of reception.
Yeah.
It just, I don't know. And that's kind of more where the Game of Thrones stuff fell, where like after you see how many, you know, how much like this past season just got shit on, you kind of feel a little different, you know, after watching like, wow, okay, they like all these people literally put just so much work into it. Not that that entitles you to, perfect reviews, of course, but I don't know. It gives you a little perspective, I guess, and it is just really cool. So I'll point both of those. I definitely recommend taking a peek at if you were into that game or that show at all.
Yeah, I haven't seen the last watch yet. The thing with Game of Thrones, man, is I think it's really underappreciated because people had so many problems with this last season that they forget like how big of a deal it was that we got this show to begin with,
Yeah,
and
right.
the scale of it, and like I'm currently watching through Breaking Bad. I'm not trying to compare them in terms of like which is the better show or whatever, but in terms of production,
it's nowhere
Breaking
close.
Bad.
Right.
Well, no, Breaking Bad doesn't. It still takes a lot of production, but it's nowhere near the scale of a Game of Thrones production.
Not much is. It's
exactly, and I think people lose the sight of that, and they're just like they're so quick to bash on it and take it for granted. And like you said, it doesn't mean that just because a lot of people put a lot of hard work into it that it's good because of that. But at the same time, it really bothers me when people who don't create things are so quick to judge and don't understand the work that goes into things.
Yeah. There's specific words that I don't like, like lazy. Like if you're going to call them lazy, like that's just verifiably false, right? No one is lazy. You might not, the writing might not be great or whatever it is, but yeah, there's certain words like that where you're like, you just can't, that's just wrong. And you might not like it. You find other better words to critique though, because that's just not accurate, that kind of thing.
Man, the irony of somebody who's calling like the people working the show lazy and they can't remember the names of characters or like it flabbergasts me sometimes. I don't know.
So then when you hear like Kit Harington came out and said something that sounded harsh initially, like when asked about critics of the last season, he said something along the lines of like they can fuck off or something like that. That sounds harsh, but you kind of understand it when you're like, he knows obviously firsthand how hard everyone works on it. So like, that's just, I don't know. It's tough, I guess.
The PlayStation documentary was cool and it shed light on some stuff, but the same thing with The Last Watch is whenever you have documentaries which are produced by the company who's doing the thing, they don't tend to be as open as you would want them to be. Mm-hmm. And the God of War one is really good, and you do get some emotional, just some great moments. But there is some stuff that, because it's PlayStation produced, they kind of, I wouldn't say cut the corners on it, but they make sure to edit out some things that wouldn't come across that great,
right? Like, you would never be able to convince me that at no point in the development of that game could you find, if you were to actually, be omnipresent and see everything, you would probably be able to find many examples of Cory Barlog or other managers just being straight up assholes and like shitty things going on and, a lot of pressure being put. You could find, I bet you could see shit like
from
that
the top down of like Cory Barlog and them being that way because they're getting pressured by people above them, and then it's like it trickles down.
Or pressured by stakeholders, etc.
Exactly,
whatever you want to.
Nothing against Cory Barlog. I still think he's a great dude, but when you're in that environment and there's that type of stress, there's not so pretty moments because it's kind of like part of it, unfortunately. All that put aside, I still think it was a great documentary. I really enjoyed it. It's just when you watch documentaries produced by the people who made the thing that the documentary is on, you can kind of tell, for
everyone's
better or worse.
Everyone's gonna has their own perspective, right? Where then like you get these big pieces from Jason Schreier giving different perspectives on studios, right? Of like, well, he found, the 15 people, maybe a couple are ex-employees or, they're going to have their own perspective about certain things, where from a different perspective, it might appear a different story, right? Or tell a different story, I guess. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the pessimist argument is that for Sony, this is essentially like PR for them. So they want to make sure that it's not negative in any glaring way,
Right.
So they walk that fine line, and I guarantee you they have obviously final say on the final cut of the documentary. Okay. I don't want to end on a negative note, though. That documentary is great. I can't wait to watch The Last Watch. Real unfortunate for Kit Harington. I don't know if you saw the thing that he checked into a rehabilitation facility recently.
Yeah.
I actually didn't read into it if it was based on drugs or anything. I don't know if it was just him not being in a great place mentally, but No matter what it is, that's unfortunate. I really can't wait to see what he does after Game of Thrones. Selfishly, I want him in the MCU somehow, some way. I just like him. I mean, I would love if a lot of those Game of Thrones actors made their way over to the MCU. But yeah, I guess we'll hop into the news now that we talked about that. Moving on, now that our Game of Thrones watch is over. We got a lot of news to go through. We're going to be ending with the Call of Duty Modern Warfare reveal. But we got a lot of stuff that's been announced this week. It's always weird because leading up to E3, it's like nothing, everything. It all happens at once, it seems like. Excuse me. First up, out of nowhere, the PlayStation exclusive, I would call out of the big three, The Last of Us, the game Ghost of Tsushima, and Death Stranding, the one that I personally thought was going to be the last one to come out, and maybe quite a lot of people did, Death Stranding not only got a trailer that showed off gameplay for the first time, it's coming out November 8th, which is 6 months from release. It's funny because out of us three, me, you, and Jordan, I think Jordan's the strongest Metal Gear guy, right? I'm pretty sure you're not super into Metal Gear.
Yeah, I've never played any, so.
Yeah, and obviously one of Jordan's favorite games is Metal Gear Solid 5, I think. So he'd be the strongest person to talk about this game. We talked about in chat after this reveal happened that we're both in the same boat of it's intriguing, but we're both going to be waiting for reviews to see if we're in immediately or not.
Yeah, it looks, all the cutscene footage we saw and the bits of story, while it's hard to understand, it's super cool, and I'm wanting more, and I want to know more about what the heck is going on and what this shit means. I'm super engaged in all that. The gameplay they showed, I was kind of all right, we'll see, I guess, because it certainly, from a gameplay perspective, the trailer did not exactly sell me on it. That's all I'll say, I guess.
That's so funny because I feel the same way. So before this trailer happened, I always talked about, I don't know what the hell is going on in this game. I just want to know what's going on. Though it's not, obviously there's a lot of confusion and mystery and stuff, there is a better understanding of what you're loosely doing in the game, right? You play as Norman Reedus, and you're trying to connect all of the cities in America to create a stronger bond. While all that is happening, there's some weird mystical, spiritual, demonic stuff happening. There's a military separatist group, and all that stuff's happening. There's even a quarantine group, I would consider them, right? The guys in the yellow suits. That's all understandable, and I like the mystery and confusion. That's cool. I want to know that when I play the game. And I'm 100% with you that when I started seeing the gameplay, I was actually cooler with the gameplay we saw before of exploring that world, right? And going through, I'm oh, this is so weird. What is this? The moment we saw the actual melee combat, I was that actually doesn't look great to me. The melee combat stuff doesn't look fun. It doesn't look great. It doesn't seem like it has a feel to it. When the punches don't seem like they land. The motorcycle thing is give or take, it's whatever. And then the one thing that got me a little worried, I don't know if you remember this section of the trailer, when he's in that war area in the bunker and he's shooting the guy, the shooting mechanics didn't really look really great. It
kind of looked like Gears of War 1 from today's lens. You know what I mean? Yeah, it didn't look great. And this is all weird because people love the gameplay of Metal Gear Solid 5, right? That's supposed to be some of the tightest, best feeling gameplay around. So it's how much did he pull over? And then also Kojima mentioned well, this is a stealth game more than anything. It's okay, well, there was a lot of they seemed to.
Well, no, he didn't say it was a stealth game. He said it's not a stealth game. It's a action adventure. You can continue on. I'm gonna try to pull up the quotes. You can go ahead with that. Whatever else you feel about the trailer.
Okay, I read that wrong. I guess I was backwards, but
I'll pull it up.
Yeah, that's about it. I still am confident that maybe this was just not a great trailer as far as displaying the gameplay, and just because of Kojima's record, track record on makes games that play fucking really well, right? Not that I have played any of them myself, but this did not sell me on that part of it. Everything else, I'm shoot, this is weird and cool, and I'm into it. A lot of questions, of course, but I think that's okay, especially at this point in the marketing cycle. As far as that's kind of where I land, though. It still comes out and not for 6 more months, so people will get some hands-on time with it, and we'll learn more. And I guess the point where it can start to get criticized about that is like, well, they put up pre-orders officially, right? So it's like, well, you're asking us to buy this game. We don't even really know what it is. Like, okay, don't pre-order it then. I don't know. I don't really pre-order games hardly ever. And if I do, it's from Amazon where it doesn't even charge you until it ships anyway. So pre-ordering in general, I think, is silly.
The only thing I pre-order is if it's a very specific case. If it's a day before the release of a game and that game has a pre-order bonus and I've seen reviews or previews and I'm sold on and I'm buying it no matter what, I'm like, okay, I'll pre-order it the day before so I get the pre-order bonus since I already know I'm buying it. I'll never pre-order a game months in advance, I think that's where you're at too.
Yeah. Plus, usually if you order or buy physically, like in the weeks after, you'll still get, for most cases that I've seen, you still get the pre-order bonuses because they come as codes in the box. Yeah. And those are shipped, as launch games or whatever. So usually you still get it. I think only like digital is there like a hard cutoff on some of those bonuses.
One thing I will say too that's off-putting for me, somebody who's not like directly connected with Metal Gear, is I actually think like a lot of the names are not are bad. Like they're not.
Yeah, it's weird, right?
Mama and Dead Man and Hard Man, and it's like I understand people like, oh, weird. It's quirky and interesting. It's like, no, those are like bad. I don't know. I'm not trying to be too harsh. Just when I saw this stuff, I was like, really? There's a huge, and obviously this is a cultural disconnect, but there is a conversation about how Hideo Kojima's female characters always. His female characters in this were named Fragile and Mama. His female character in MGS5 was Quiet,
which was its own thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that was.
They tend to be a little bit over-sexualized. They tend to be from a bygone era of video games. It's just, obviously, just because a character's named Fragile doesn't mean they're a fragile character, obviously. But it's just it's a weird thing that's been happening with his games that could be a bad look in 2019, I guess is the best way to put it. It doesn't really bother me that much. I mean, I hate the names in general just because I think they're bad names. It has nothing to do with it being sexist. But it's very weird. To the quote real quick. He tweeted, "Death Stranding is not a stealth game. It is a brand new action game with the concept of connection, Strand. I call it social strand system or simply Strand game."
Yeah. So whatever the heck that means. Hopefully there's some substance to that is actually engaging from a gameplay perspective. I don't get it, but I hope that what he's saying makes sense.
Well, thematically, on a very root level, I love the whole game is based on America becoming disconnected from one another, which kind of parallels what's happening currently, right?
Which is, I love that idea too. That was part of the reason why I loved, what's it called? Black Panther too, is kind of some of the same ideas there too, right? Are we, building walls or bridges, and the main character's name in the game is literally Sam Bridges or something silly, like something on the nose, right?
Isolationism and like separatists and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly.
So I guess we're still in the same boat. If it gets great reviews, I'm really excited. The next part here actually has me a little sad because I want to play this game more than Death Stranding. After Death Stranding's release date was announced, Schreier came out and stated that from what he had heard is that The Last of Us Part 2 was actually also slated for 2019, fall 2019, but it got moved, and it seems like it's likely going to be landing early 2020. He said that February would probably be the likeliest candidate for a month. Obviously, all the clickbait headlines started happening. Oh, Last of Us Part 2 got delayed. Last of Us Part 2 got delayed. As we were talking about, internal delays happen. This game never had a hard date, so technically it did get delayed if it was planned for 2019, but we don't know that. And like we were talking about before the show, if we knew about every internal delay, then arguably almost every game that would come out would be called delayed, right? Because video game development is hard, and there's very few studios that can stick to a set release date years in advance. Obviously, as the months draw closer, when you're a year out, you want to kind of nail that in, as we saw in the documentary we talked about earlier, of them trying to nail in a release date and even getting pushed back a little bit later during the year in which it released. They had to move the release date. So, I'm excited. This has me questioning whether or not Ghost of Tsushima will release simultaneously on the PS4 and PS5. Because we have Death Stranding now, right? November 8th. We have Last of Us Part 2. We assume, based on Jason Schreier's report, February 2020. Does that mean, what do you think is more likely, Ghost of Tsushima fall or Ghost of Tsushima, like, before E3? You know?
Probably fall. What makes this even more interesting, too, is they've already said that PS5 will be backwards compatible.
Yeah.
Which is different than the last generational transition for Sony. So that changes the equation a little bit when you're trying to guess, like, what will these last couple games release on which platforms, right? So I could see them all three releasing on just PS4 and never getting an official release on PS5. Maybe they get an update because they're already going to work on PS5 no matter what, right? So maybe they just get an update of like, oh, well, now on if you play it on PS5, it gets, it takes it more advantage of the hardware or something. But I don't know that I see either of these games releasing straight up on PS5.
I mean, I would, if out of those three, I would almost guarantee The Last of Us Part 2 is going to get a remaster edition on PS5. What did they call The Last of Us Part 1 on PS4 called?
I think it was just Last of Us Remastered.
Yeah, but to your point, it's like, does Sony just, put an upgrade in there that ups the performance of it so when you put it in the PS5? Or do they know, because they can, get more money out of people with another $60 release and release it again? Death Stranding is more of a niche title. I know people love Kojima, but I don't know if it's going to be as broadly popular as like a Spider-Man or a God of War, right? Last of Us Part 2 is going to sell like crazy, obviously. That one is the one that I think is most likely. Ghost of Tsushima is an open world game, so that could possibly hit a wider audience. That one too, probably being the one closest to PS5, is probably the least likely to get it.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because it could be something in between where they re-release the game on PS5, we'll say for Last of Us, right? And they say, oh, yep, this is a PS5 version, there's more textures, yada, yada. But then maybe if you already owned it on PS4, you're either SOL, or maybe there's like a $30 upgrade you can buy to update to the PS5 official version. So Dark Souls 2 did something very similar to that.
Yeah.
Which is what gave me the idea, where they had their upgraded version. If you already owned it on PC, then you could pay a cheaper price basically just to upgrade your version to the remastered edition. I don't know. It could be some combination of this.
Or they could launch it maybe not near launch, but near the PS5 Pro, right? When the mid-generation iterative console comes out, the one that's more powerful than the PS5, maybe that's when they're like, oh, and Last of Us Part 2 is getting a full-on remaster, and it'll probably come with something new in it to justify the purchase, like a new chapter in DLC or something. Who knows?
I think, especially for Last of Us, though, there has to be something for PS5 to help them sell PS5 when it first comes out, right? More than just, it works, it's backwards compatible. I think that will be a title where they want to, like, do something. They'll probably have other, launch area games to emphasize, PS5 is new, it's cool or whatever. But I think Last of Us would be one where they want to, like, have something to help sell that console as like, this is more powerful, it loads faster, whatever the hell else, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that we were talking about with, and we're not too sure how the PlayStation backwards compatibility is going to roll out either, because remember with Xbox they kind of had to go game by game with the 360, right? So we don't have clarification on it. Obviously there will probably be a good number of first party games at launch, but is it going to roll out the way Xbox's did? And Xbox, what we talked about, and PlayStation will have a little bit of this too at launch when we figure out the details on how their backwards compatibility will happen, is you have built-in value at launch with the purchase of the console because you can play all of your previous generation titles, right? For Xbox, it's all of, well, not all of them, but a lot of them. For PlayStation, how is that going to work for them? Is it going to be, I'm not saying it won't be, but we just don't have any clarification as to, are they rolling out on a timed basis? Is it like a big catalog of games?
Yeah, because I know Xbox, like Phil Spencer mentioned, that they kind of had to renegotiate all the deals of like, well, we were selling this game on Xbox 360, but we need to put in place a new deal for it to be backwards compatible on Xbox One. I would hope, I mean, from the way, what was it, Cerny or whoever the hell was talking about PS5 basically said the biggest reason they wanted it to be backwards compatible was so like all your digital titles would just work.
Yeah.
Especially right on the new console. So it very vaguely, if you really wanted to jump to conclusions and infer, you would be led to believe that that just means everything that's PS4 that you own will just work on PS5, just straight up everything, right?
Yeah,
but I feel like that's trickier than that.
I think all the first-party and Sony-published titles will work. I almost guarantee that'll be the case, right? All the first-party stuff will work automatically. It's how quickly are they getting those re-licensing deals done?
I guess, and that's the other part of it. Maybe that's already been done. Maybe every game that was released on PS4 kind of already included that.
The clause in it. Yeah.
Exactly. That we also reserve the right to sell this on future PlayStation consoles or something.
And that's actually a positive for PlayStation in this, for PlayStation gamers, is that it's different for the Xbox, bringing Xbox and Xbox 360 games up, and then when the new console launches, you have all three generations. Whereas with PlayStation, it's just PS4. So you're not talking about those older licensing deals, right? They're kind of new-ish. Mm-hmm. I mean, they could be from 2014, which was 5 years ago, but in the grand scheme of things. So I don't think it's going to be as hard as like if it was PS3 games, but we just don't know the rollout, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see what happens there when we get more information. Next up, Need for Speed is set for 2019. The developers had a blog post on the EA website, and they said they're bypassing E3 to focus on delivering the best celebration of Need for Speed's 25th anniversary in their new 2019 entry. I wanted to bring this up. We're not really racing game guys, but the fact of the matter is this is a EA published game. Need for Speed is EA's like flagship racing title, and it's coming out in the fall, and it's not going to be at E3. And I like the transparency here from the developer and the fact that EA let them do this of like, I think with this, Dom, people forget how much work goes into an E3 presentation or trailer or vertical slice, right? It takes away from your active development of a game, and they're just like, hey, we want to focus on actually polishing this game and making it an entry that people love for the 25th anniversary. We didn't want to pull off and take 2.5 months to make something for E3, right? So I just thought it was a really cool blog post because they could have just gone silent and it could have been like, oh yeah, Need for Speed wasn't at E3. They didn't have to put this out, right? So I just thought it was
that's
cool.
One of those. It's always one of those catch-22s of like, obviously you need marketing, and you need trailers, and you need E3 presentations for games to sell them, but that also takes away from the literal development of the game. So it's kind of it's always a tough thing, but it's good to hear that, like you said, they're being transparent about it.
A couple of Xbox stuff. Xbox Game Pass is coming to PC. We'll find out more info at E3. We know that it will be included in the Xbox Ultimate Game Pass, which includes Xbox Live as well as Game Pass, so it'll include the PC version. We're not sure if your console subscription is connected to the PC one or if they're separate. It's a question people have been asking. We're not sure about that yet. There's been no clarity. We'll probably find that out at E3. Moments before starting the show's recording, Phil Spencer tweeted out that the Xbox E3 2019 briefing will feature 14 Xbox Game Studios games, which is the most ever for Xbox. Really quickly, I try to put something together to try to figure out how many of those will maybe be new titles. So, there's 3 different categories on this, Dom. 1, there's the actual first-party studio games, which are Sea of Thieves, Crackdown 3, Gears 5, Halo Infinite, Wasteland 3, and Minecraft, right? That's 6. We're likely going to see Minecraft, Halo, Gears, and Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves already said they're going to be at E3. I listed Crackdown 3, but that's a game I could totally see not being there or being there. It's like in the middle. It's like, are they going to show an update or are they just going to forget about it, And Wasteland 3 is the new game for In Exile, which was one of Microsoft's purchases. It's their game that's going to be coming out this year. So, if you don't count Crackdown, 3 is 5, right? So it's 5 out of the 14, so we're down to 9. Even if you do count Crackdown 3, we're down to 8. Still 8 games. Now, the second tier, We Happy Few in the Outer Worlds. These are weird because these are games being released or that have released from studios they own, but they're not published by Microsoft. So they're not technically Xbox Game Studios games, but Xbox owns those studios.
You really get into the semantics here of what he said, and yeah.
Exactly. So who's to say if they count or not, right? I think it's likelier that we see the Outer Worlds than We Happy Few, but there may be a new We Happy Few DLC or something, or it may be Compulsion's new game. We don't know. Let's say We Happy Few doesn't count, right? That's Gearbox's game. It doesn't count. We'll count Outer Worlds because we're likely to see that. So we're saying it's 7 games. So out of the 14, we know what 7 of them are, assumedly. We got 7 left. Now there's only 2 other titles that could possibly fall in this, and these fall into the category, a third category, of games that aren't developed by an Xbox game studio, but they're published by Xbox, okay? Like so, Ori. Who's to say if these count? Ori and... Dang it, I just lost my train of thought.
Cuphead people?
No, not Cuphead. Ori... Cuphead is, but they likely won't show their game. It was Cuphead, Ori and Battletoads. Battletoads isn't developed by an in-house studio, but it is a Microsoft-owned IP. So, if we count those 2 games, say both of those, we can even throw in Cuphead, right? That's down to 4. If you don't count Cuphead, it's 5. I don't count Cuphead, but let's just say we'll count Cuphead. 4. So there's 4 games that we don't know about. I doubt we see the Initiatives game because they're so early. One of the games on this list would be Fable 4, hopefully, right? From Playground Games. One thing to note here, people will say, oh, Jerrad, you're forgetting Forza Motorsport 8. That comes out this year. Last year's Forza Horizon. When doing research for our pre-E3 podcast, Dom, guess what I found out? Turn 10 actually announced late last year that there will be no Forza Motorsport game in 2019. Which makes sense because which game is always the flagship launch title for a new Xbox console? Forza Motorsport. So they didn't do one this year because Forza Motorsport 8 will be next year, and it'll be a launch title for the next Xbox. So we're not getting a new Forza game this year. Those games don't have a long timeline between showing them and releasing them. So if it's not coming out this year, we're not seeing it at E3. I'd put my life savings on that. So out of the 4 games, we got Fable 4. What do you think those other 3 are off the top of your head? We don't have to go long on this, but just if there's anything that comes to mind.
Halo, right? Or did you mention that?
Halo's part of the grouping.
Okay. I mean, it's new stuff. It's got to be new stuff, right?
Here's what people think. People think we might see Ninja Theory's new game. People forget that Ninja Theory makes smaller projects. They made Hellblade in, I think, 2.5 years or something crazy like that.
And then I'll add really quick before is like any of these studios that Microsoft bought could have had things already in the oven for a while that were included in that purchase that just because Microsoft just bought the studio doesn't necessarily mean all the projects they might be working on started from scratch.
Started the moment they purchased them. Yep.
Right. There might be stuff ready to go sooner than we think. Now, the only place that wouldn't be the case probably, like you mentioned, is for the Initiative because that was a studio kind of built ground up, right?
So people are hoping we see Ninja Theory's new game, and the other one that's percolating is people think we might see the return of either Banjo or Conquer. People forget that Rare has so many employees, and obviously they're working on Sea of Thieves as time goes on, but they have talked about they work on multiple projects at a time. So people are hoping we see one of those. It's really cool that they're going to have this on top of, we already know Xbox shows a ton of third-party titles. Last year they showed 50 games in total, and the pacing was great. It was just a fantastic show, so can't wait for this year. Next up, the Initiative, which we just mentioned. I just wanted to mention real quickly, they had some key hires. They hired some people from Naughty Dog, Blur. If you're familiar with Blur, they were known for doing a lot of the CG trailers between 2005 and 2015.
Mm-hmm. The Witcher one, I believe, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very well known. They do movie trailers too, but game trailers people know. They hired ex-Treyarch people, obviously Call of Duty studio, former EA people, but from the computer engineering section, and then people from EA Motive. So they're hiring a lot of people from studios that have done stuff, it's just cool because they're keeping to what they said. They're bringing in a team that can make very high quality, polished quadruple A games, right? So seeing all of these talented people coming together gets me excited to see what they're working on. This one's for Greg Miller. Ghostbusters, the video game remaster, is launching 2019. Good for Greg Miller and everyone else who loves Ghostbusters.
All 10 of you guys.
Exactly.
There's more than that.
Speaking of a fandom that's more than 10 people, Square Enix finally confirmed that we're going to see Marvel's Avengers, finally, and it has a name, Marvel's Avengers. It was previously under Project Reassemble, I think, Project Avengers Reassemble.
Ah, cool.
Has an official title, Marvel's Avengers. This is the third game in the Marvel partnership stuff, and they've all started with Marvel's blank. So Marvel's Spider-Man, Marvel's Avengers, and Marvel's Iron Man VR. So it's kind of the branding they want for it.
Was it even Marvel's Telltale's Guardians of the Galaxy?
No. I don't know if that counted. I think that licensing deal might have been done before their like new initiative, actually.
Yeah, probably.
Maybe. Who knows? But out of, I guess, like the bigger games, I guess Iron Man VR isn't big, but you know. Anyways, so people were looking at the E3 E3 Coliseum thing that Jeff Keighley does, and in it, when they're showing what they're going to be talking about, they list descriptions for the games. After it was announced that Marvel's Avengers is going to show up at Square Enix's conference, during the Coliseum thing, they posted a detailed description of the game, giving us details. For a long time, we assumed this was going to be a games of service game. With these details, it seems to be confirmed, but it basically revealed that it's going to have single-player, up to 4-player co-op. You're going to be able to combine powers to take down enemies. So think of like if Dom's Iron Man and I'm Cap, he can shoot his beam off of my shield and it reflects and hits enemies. I hope that's the case. That's kind of what it's described as. And lastly, hero customization. Me interjecting here, I hope it's that like, hey, you can be Cap, but you can get the Winter Soldier suit or the Nomad suit or like the authentic corny Avengers suit, you know, with the circle helmet and all of that. With Iron Man, it'd be crazy because he has so many suits, right? So I'm hoping with hero customization, it isn't just like your power set or like your weapons at hand, but your costume too. I really hope there's a lot of the cosmetic microtransactions on the thing are going to be insane. Yeah, I guess we don't have to talk too much about it, Dom, but I'm just happy we got confirmation we're going to see this game. I don't think it's a 2019 title. Deal. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I'm like 50-50. It could still be 2019, but either way, I don't know. This is pretty hype. I think this is a big deal. Like, and because it's Crystal Dynamics doing it, and I'm not a crazy fan of like the Tomb Raider games they put out, just narrative wise. The first one kind of was just like, but it was super fun and it looked super good, super polished. I don't know. This Avengers game, I think, is going to be the real deal.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, I'm not trying to give them a pass on the Tomb Raider games, but Tomb Raider doesn't necessarily has a long history in video games, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have like a rich, vibrant lore that you can pull all of this amazing stuff from. A lot of it is very much inspired by like the action adventure movies of like the 70s and 80s, right? In Indiana Jones and stuff. And obviously partially the new one, partially by Uncharted as well. I'm not saying Tomb Raider's bad or it can't have a good story. I'm just saying in terms of working with Tomb Raider or working with Marvel, you have a lot more to pull from with Marvel. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. You have a ton of, you just had a whole, however many movie, list, however many freaking MCU movies to pull bits from, and obviously, decades of source material worth of comics and every other thing. Yeah. So like there's a lot more flexibility and you're right. They should have an easier time with the narrative. I agree.
My only disappointment will be if this game launches with a roster less than 6. That'll really kill me. Like if it launches with only 4 different characters,
So here you can help me out then. The standard, the Avengers, right?
6.
Who does that include? That
includes
6, so that's
Iron Man, Cap, Hulk, Thor, Hawkeye, and Black Widow.
Okay, Hawkeye's who I always forget.
Okay. Everybody does, don't worry. And that's like the MCU standard Avengers. Like Wasp is technically one of the original Avengers. So that would be interesting. I want to see if they differentiate themselves from the MCU. I would love if it's a wholly original thing, but it pays reference and homage to the MCU, right? Because I just don't want to play. Right? I don't want to play through the MCU again. That's boring to me. I have the MCU, but I would love stuff if it's inspired by it. And I don't know. I'm just the whole thing about is it set in the same universe as Spider-Man has been cagey. Bill Roseman said some stuff that has kind of alluded to maybe it is. Because I'm just very interested to see how that all shakes out. and the character list, and we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. This is exciting, and I'm not even a big Avengers fan, but I think this is a big deal. And as far as connection, like specifically to Spider-Man or other Marvel games, because obviously in Spider-Man there was the Avengers Tower, so like, and there were bits of dialogue mentioning like Black Panther and some other things. But you could chalk that up to like, oh, those are just Easter eggs, right? Or it could be more. To be honest, I think it would definitely be easier, I would imagine, from a developer's point of view, to keep it contained and keep your game as your game in your world, and not have to worry about, taking, especially from other studios, connecting things like that. But that's more ambitious if you were to try to do something crazy like that. I don't know. There's a lot here.
I mean, and I think people, like, I agree with you, but maybe it isn't even that deep. Like, what if, which would suck, but I wouldn't be surprised. So what if Spider-Man isn't allowed to be in this game as a playable character, right? Because of a contract. Obviously, Sony owns Spider-Man, so it's like,
right.
Maybe he's not allowed to be in this game as a playable character. Maybe he can make a cameo. If he makes a cameo, I don't think that's that, like, they don't have to use, they can hire the same voice actor to do Spider-Man. They don't have to use the same model. They're talented enough to make a Spider-Man model, right? They don't have to necessarily use the same assets. I think it'd be less crossover than like what we would worry about. The other thing is, this is the biggest property that we'll possibly ever have in the games as service model. Division, Tom Clancy's a pretty big IP, but it's not nothing's really Avengers or Marvel except for Star Wars. Like, it's crazy. Over the last 10 years, Marvel's Avengers has catapulted to that. People forget, like, before the MCU took off, Justice League, for all intents and purposes, was way more popular than the Avengers. And then it skyrocketed and it took off. So, interested to see what happens. It's one of my most anticipated reveals. It has me excited for the Square Enix conference. I was still interested in it because I just like video games. I want to watch it. But now I'm, like, super into it, Can't wait. To note on the Square Enix conference, Dying Light 2 is going to be published by them, so it's probably going to appear at their conference as well. The first one was published by Warner Brothers. This one is actually being published by Square Enix. I wonder if it's maybe, obviously Warner Brothers has a ton of money, but you'd assume they're publishing Cyberpunk, right? That's going to be a big title. We're assuming they're also going to be publishing the next Rocksteady game whenever that comes out. Maybe it was just like Dying Light 2 wasn't, maybe their catalog was a little bit more barren, right, when Dying Light was looking for a publisher, and they're like, we'll take this on. This will be a good sales success. But now it's like they probably just are like, nah. Square Enix is a weird publisher.
A one-time deal with the first Dying Light, and then that developer found a better deal with Square Enix or something.
It could have been a mutual separation of, like, Dying Light maybe didn't like working with them, or maybe Warner Bros. Didn't see the return. Who knows? Pokemon Sword and Shield Direct. It's happening June 5th, the same day as a weird Destiny 2 reveal event. People who thought that Pokemon was going to be the main attraction of Nintendo's conference don't know Pokemon. They're never the main attraction for a Nintendo conference. They do things on their terms. No Pokemon game has ever been, like, fully showcased at a Direct first. It's always been beforehand, right? We'll still see Pokemon Sword and Shield during the Nintendo Direct, but this is going to be the one where they flesh out what's really going on. That being said, earlier this week we had a Pokemon conference, which is a weird pish-posh of business and entertainment, and it was weird. But the two announcements I want to focus on for this: Detective Pikachu follow-up is headed to Switch. It's not sure if this is a sequel or if it's the first game with more story added to it. And Pokemon Home was...
Is that like... Is this a game, or is this a show or a movie, or what the heck is it?
Detective Pikachu is a game. It was on the 3DS.
Okay.
That's what the movie is based on. Yeah.
The movie never knew that.
Yeah, so
wow.
The game doesn't end where the movie ends. It ends on a cliffhanger. So people aren't sure if this thing on Switch is going to be a sequel, or if they're just going to be, because the movie was so successful in theaters, they're just going to do the ending in the original and then re-release it on Switch. People aren't sure which one it is. They also announced Pokemon Home, which is essentially Pokemon Bank, but it can be accessed from any device. For Pokemon fans, this is huge. This is something we've been wanting for years. This allows you to not have your Nintendo console with you, your handheld, and you can trade with your friends, which is really awesome, especially for younger kids. I'm not really into trading Pokemon that much in the scene these days, but for kids, it's cool that you could just trade Pokemon with your friends on your phone, and you don't have to carry your 3DS. It allows you to save Pokemon through the generations, so you don't have to worry about plugging your GBA into your Game Boy and transferring over your Pokemon to make sure you have the ones from the first generation in the second generation. With the 3DS, they finally added the Pokebank, which allowed it to be a lot more seamless. This is even better. One thing I'm interested in, they didn't announce if there was a price for this. Pokemon Bank was $5 per year, which I thought was fine. I've been paying for the storage or whatever. They didn't mention a price on this. I don't know if this is just a free app, which makes it even better than Pokemon Bank, because then you don't have to pay for it. So, I know it doesn't really interest you, Dom, but I think you can see the positive news in this, right? For people who've been wanting the hassle of moving Pokemon from one place to another. It's 2019. Give us a damn phone app that lets us do it whenever we want, right?
Well, it's fascinating that Pokemon is the most advanced right now in terms of using the Internet of Things, right, as a part of their games and to get people connected from more places. Like they're farther ahead in this than any other developer or publisher or whatever, as far as they're getting you with different devices and things are interacting across those devices, and they're way ahead of everybody else. It's kind of fascinating because this is the kind of thing where the world is going with in a lot of different regards. This kind of technology. I know I'm getting in a bit of a weird tangent, but they're ahead of the game in a lot of ways and using things that other video game companies are not. So it's really fascinating that they're the only ones that kind of really venture out, at least successfully, into this kind of stuff of. Yeah, you have this Pokemon. It started with the bank, right? And that was ahead of its time, even though it was just on 3DS or whatever. But I don't know. This is kind of a big deal and very forward thinking that they're latching onto this trend ahead of everybody else, I think.
Well, and that's funny because it shows one of the key separations between the Pokemon Company and Nintendo. Nintendo has had a track record of maybe not answering to what fans want, maybe being a little behind in terms of hardware and online infrastructure, and Pokemon is detached from Nintendo, and they're, like you said, they're above and beyond in a lot of ways from a lot of companies. So there was a whole sleep thing we didn't mention. It's not worth it. Look it up if you want to. Or pre-order your Pokemon Plus Plus.
That especially, goes into what I was saying about somehow they're integrating Pokemon into their network, into your sleep schedule, into some kind of device or whatever. They obviously already have AR stuff going on your phone, and I don't know. I think they're they're ahead of the game. They have this roadmap, and they're thinking weirdly, but in the scope of information technology in the world, this is kind of the trend. It's just they're the only video game company so far to really jump onto that we've seen.
Well, yeah, and it's eventually going to be one device that encompasses all of that stuff, and you just carry with you to your Pokeball, right? And it does all of this stuff, and it'll have all of these different things involved in one single thing. I just can't wait to see Pokemon Sword and Shield on June 5th. I know people are disappointed it's not the big console thing. We talked about on the podcast, Dom. I tried to prepare for it. I was like, it's not going to be what people think the first time around. There's no way. It doesn't make sense, right, from their development standpoint. Anyways, let's hop into the big topic real quick. Call of Duty Modern Warfare reveal. Yes, it's called Modern Warfare. And I'm not as salty as a lot of people are in terms of it being named this way because of what Infinity Ward said about the game. So here are the details straight from Call of Duty's mouth. It's releasing October 25th, 3 weeks after Ghost Recon Breakpoint. 2 years in a row, it's releasing in October instead of November, where it was steadily releasing at, which is pretty interesting.
That's a good point. That is interesting because I remember this now, flashback 7 months or whatever, to where, granted, I'm sure Red Dead was at least part of the reason they moved the release date last year, but it's interesting that they're staying with it this year.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think. I think there's 2 big games coming out in November. There's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and I think Death Stranding. Yes, there's another game. Though I like I said, I think Death Stranding, as whether it's good or bad, is still more of a niche title than people believe.
I think it'll be more of a a Bloodborne more than a God of War. Maybe.
Yeah, like a Bloodborne, Detroit Become Human, kind of ish range.
Yeah, more like a a $3-4 million seller as opposed to a 10 million God of War type seller.
Yeah, it'll definitely sell
Yeah,
more
it's
than
still
Days
loved.
Gone. Like Horizon Zero Dawn, maybe less than that probably. Anyways,
Yeah, I don't know.
so
weird.
it's not a reboot or a remake. It's actually more of a reimagining. And this we'll go into this later with some of the characters you see in the reveal. But the former Naughty Dog devs who worked on Uncharted are leading the campaign development. And one of the quotes they said was, "We're looking for Jaws, not Saw." And basically, what they meant by that is they want a lot of high intensity action scenes, but they don't really want to rely just on gore and like violence, right? As you would see in a Saw movie, which I thought was really interesting.
Well, they clearly missed like the great writing and mystery plot of the first 2 Saw movies, but whatever.
Yeah, but they're talking more about the gore porn of it, right?
Yeah.
Of like just the blood and all that. So it's going to have cross-play support and co-op gameplay. The cross-play support, obviously, between hardware, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. I didn't read if it was also PC, Dom. Did you catch that by chance?
The crossplay?
Yeah.
I thought it was the opposite, where it was really only confirmed console to PC.
Gotcha, okay.
And it was kind of, no one really knows whether you'll be PS4 to Xbox.
Got it, okay.
Because Sony obviously hasn't really been too eager to do that thing.
The co-op gameplay, there was a game mode that they talked about, which is kind of like, man, I can't remember the game mode in the old Modern Warfare games. Spec Ops? Special Ops? Same thing. The co-op, there's going to be co-op gameplay in the multiplayer and in some game modes as well. Brand new engine. Also, one of the interesting things, it's going to have mocap actors, so it's actually full-on actor capture. And that's different from previous Call of Duty games, especially for Modern Warfare specifically, where it's you make a character model, you have a different actor record voice lines, and then you match those two things up. Very rarely do Call of Duty games actually have full-on actors mo-capped and performance captured. The only time that ever happens when it's the Kevin Spaceys or the Kit Haringtons of the world. This one, like almost every character in this game, major characters obviously, are going to have that. So they cast actors. There's an actor who's Captain Price, and that's the other thing. Captain Price was in this trailer. An actor who strangely looks like Captain Price originally did, but slightly different because it's actually capturing the look of the actor himself. And me inferring this, it'll probably feature other Modern Warfare characters that we're familiar with. Soap McTavish, obviously. Gaz. McMillan, who's the guy who's your partner in All Gillied Up, if you remember him. He's the sniper. A lot of the characters from that first game. Maybe the second game, who knows, but it seems like they told a reimagining of the first Modern Warfare. You'll be playing missions from opposing perspectives, and I think this goes in line right down with Infinity Ward wanting to reimagine the first game, because it was very pro-American in its warfare, and it was very pro our perspective. And I think now in the current age of war and military violence, there's a lot of different perspectives, and you need to understand where everyone's coming from. And a lot of times war is fought between gray area, right? It's not necessarily wholly good and wholly evil fighting against each other. So I think it's if they pay this off with what they want to do, and I want to get to this after we're done with all the details, I'm really interested because it's going to show a commitment to tell a strong narrative in a Call of Duty game. And I've liked their single player before, but this could be something really special. In the previews, Brandon Jones from Easy Allies mentioned Chadwick Boseman is the lead in this game. He's pretty much the only person who previewed it, who went to the preview that mentioned this. That's a big actor. It's going to draw in a lot of people. Obviously, Black Panther himself, who Don mentioned earlier. And he talked about a mission in which it's kind of like survival horror-y. You're a little kid. Your house gets invaded by the Russian military or some terrorists, essentially. And the mission is you hiding between walls in the house, trying to take down the soldier with a screwdriver. And it's like hit and run tactics. And it's very tense, and it's very emotionally engaging because you fear for this child's life. There's another, I think the mission ends, or a different mission involves like a kid picking up a gun. So they're very much trying to get these disturbing images that we kind of gloss over when we think about war and put them right in your face. It reminds me a lot of, what's the name of the mission from MW2, Dom, with the terminal?
No Russian.
No Russian, right? That's very captivating in terms of
and what else Jesus. It sounds a lot like is, as you mentioned, they have some people from Naughty Dog. I mean, it sounds like something that could have been pulled right out of The Last of Us, just in a modern warfare setting, right? So,
yeah. And them leading the campaign development is really exciting. Last thing I want to mention before we talk about, are we excited for this game and all of that and this reveal and how it went? No season pass, and there will be free post-launch content, maps, and other goodies. And you obviously joked in our chat. You're like, "This seems too good to be true. What's the catch?" Will they release, the microtransactions 2 weeks after launch?
I got burned. I mean, I'm okay, but whatever. But when Battlefront 2 was first announced, and they said, free DLC, no season pass. I'm like, fuck, like that's awesome. Like all 3 eras of Star Wars or whatever, no season. And then obviously it came out, and it just brutal loot boxes that could help you win, yada yada. We all know the whole story there. And Call of Duty, and I think you've mentioned this a few times, they've been pretty bad about microtransactions the last few games, and they've not gotten as much attention as EA and some other developers have. And I think at least once they did that, where they've introduced microtransactions a week or two after release, after reviews are out.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's slimy. So I just don't trust that there won't be some shady shit going on in there still.
The crazy thing is this is a Call of Duty that I might see as a Doom or a Last of Us, in the sense of I'm buying it solely for the single player campaign and the multiplayer's extra. So if it ends up having crummy microtransactions, that won't affect me as much because I'm more focused on the single player. Do I want it to have a really cool multiplayer that doesn't screw you? Yes. But with the more we see of this game and potentially how well it reviews, this might be a game that I'm like, I'm getting that single player Call of Duty game that happens to have multiplayer on it, in my mind,
Oh, dude, I'm 100. Like, if there's anything, maybe 1 out of 100 things they could do to get me personally interested in this game, they did it. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm 100% on board. Like the emphasis they're putting on the campaign, and bringing in our Naughty Dog friends, and doing mocap, like all, and like the kind of different kind of story they're telling. Like this is all like hell yeah, like let's go. I'm in 100%. I'm not as worried about any microtransaction stuff either. Plus, let's remember, like it was like a week or two ago. Who knows what'll end up happening? But in the United States, there was like a bill introduced to like essentially outlaw, pay to win and loot boxes, etc., in games that the companies know kids are playing.
Exactly.
Which is weird phrasing, because the game will be rated M, but if they know kids are playing it, which of course they are, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But hopefully that at least leads to some self-regulating and companies being a little more conscious of the types of microtransactions they're putting in games, as well as this one.
To your point in terms of purchasing, if this game, there's 3 different situations that can happen, right? Well, I guess there's more than that, but the 3 situations I see is this game during reviews very well, right? Both multiplayer, single player, great. That's the best case scenario. I'm in. Second case scenario, I'd also be in. The campaign reviews very well. The multiplayer is full of microtransactions, or it's not good, or it's whatever. I'm still in, right?
I'm with you. Yep.
Third thing, multiplayer is great. Single player is not good. I'm out. Fourth thing, it's all not great. I'm out.
Right? Yeah, naturally.
So as long as the campaign is not a bomb and it's good, I don't care really about the multiplayer. I'm in, because like you, we have this attachment to Modern Warfare, and they got us. They got us. So
man, it looks good. Like
yeah,
this new engine, I think it's more than just dev marketing speak. Like what they showed looked impressive graphically. So
this looks like the first step towards next gen for Call of Duty. So,
yeah, definitely.
Very interested. Can't wait to hear more. They said we'll see more at the E3 Coliseum. But you need to go read the description on that. Maybe they leak some details about it. But it's pretty much it for this week's episode of the Controlled Interest Gamecast. Like I said, next week we're not going to have a traditional episode. We're going to be having our pre-E3 podcast going up, starting with Ubisoft and ending with Xbox. So we have 4 of them. We're going to be doing Ubisoft, Nintendo, EA, Ubisoft, Nintendo, Bethesda, and Xbox with all of our guests. And yeah, hopefully you guys dig that. Jordan will be on those. Obviously, Dom will be on it. I will, and our guests. In terms of what we're going to be playing, I'm going to continue with Outer Wilds, see how wacky it gets with Groundhog's Day style gameplay. Going to play some more Spyro, and also Wargroove. I didn't have a chance to get back into that. I'm really interested to see if I hit that wall that Jordan did and how I feel about the damage being tied to health. What about you, Dom?
I don't know yet. It's going to be either Edith Finch, Katana Zero, or Neo 2.
Oh, yeah, the alpha. Is it timed, or is it like there's X amount of game in it, right? Is it like a section of the game, or is it?
I think, that, I'm not sure of it. I want to say it's like 2 levels, and then it's only until a certain date.
But it's not like you have X amount of gameplay time, right? It's not that.
I don't believe so. I think it's just like you get 2 missions or something. I could be wrong.
Interesting. I watched gameplay for the first Neo, and it just didn't do it for me necessarily. Not that it was bad. It didn't really intrigue me.
I was on the fence. I thought the combat looked great and the enemies looked cool, but the level structure,
that's what I didn't like. Yeah,
that was kind of what I was like. And I've been waiting. I've been like, if it goes on sale really cheap, I might do it. But it was never been quite cheap enough for me to want to get into it. Plus, it's like a long game apparently too. Like, just even one playthrough can be 60, 70 hour range, I guess. So I'm like, oof.
And then you're always in between like a From title, so it's like, do I want to dive into something that's similar, or do I wait for the next From game?
It's been like a weird thing for me, right? I should like it, but I just haven't taken the risk yet.
Yeah.
I want to try this alpha out, so maybe that's what I need to push me over the edge, at least on the sequel, if nothing else.
Yep. I'd be interested to see how the character customization, like creation stuff, is interesting. And the fact that you can like turn into a demon is cool. Yeah, that is it for episode 148. If you can, please follow us on Twitter at CTRLINT, that's Controlled Interest Abbreviated. We tweet out all of our video uploads. I am at Jerrad_, Dom is at Dom's Oreos. You can go to iTunes, follow us there, leave us a review. It helps us move up in the algorithm so people can see the podcast. On YouTube, you can search Controlled Interests. We'll pop up, subscribe, hit the bell notification so you know when we upload a new video, because YouTube subscription boxes are all kinds of messed up. Like the videos too, that helps us in the YouTube algorithm. That's pretty much it. We'll catch you guys next week with all of our pre-E3 goodness. See you later. Bye.